The last of the line was terrible.
I can ask later.
Dan?
She's been standing there long enough. Let's go.
Okay. Alrighty. Back to Carolyn.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Peters. I am currently an associate software engineer at Mastercard. The things I say are not in the space legal stuff. I talk for myself, not for the company. So this is Bash scripting for beginners, for like very beginners. And disclaimer, this presentation primarily focuses on control structures in Bash. This was originally for people who are new to programming in general, so students with about 200 hours of coding experience in general, typically Python, Java stacks. And that being said, not a lot of command line experience, and I may not be able to answer your questions if you have any, but I'm sure someone can. So what is Bash scripting? It's commands on commands. The audience this was originally for was launch Git students, and they all learned Git within the first few weeks of class. So mkdir, cd, ls, pwd, rm-r if you're me. Very common.
That's RF.
Huh?
That's RF.
Go big or go home.
So Bash scripting allows you to take more complex commands or things you just do over and over and turn them into executable files or .sh files. And there are examples, but since I can't use them on my machine, they're all on GitHub. So if you're interested, there's a link at the end of this, and you can go download that. I'll get a readme up and some comments about that stuff.
It's got one of those.
Or I could just put it in the comments. This is the whole shebang. The shebang. I like puns. The shebang basically just tells the interpreter that you're using what type of script you're using, or what type of element kernel. So we have file owners. So we have the user, who's typically by default the person who created the file, then the group, which is people that the user says, hey, I want them to have more access to this file than other, which is everyone else, also known as Word. And just interrupt me if you have any questions. Then we have file permissions, which by default are read, write, execute. Read allows you to see what's in the file. Write allows you to modify the contents, and execute allows you to run the program.
Wow.
Then the permissions, the do-go, as I like to call it. The first just tells you that it's a directory, and we have the user, which is the owner, the user group, and everyone else, and that's all read, write, execute. So down here, we've got my little example, which was a file, not a directory. Owner can read, write, execute. The user group can read and execute, and other people can read and execute. And then changing permissions, we change permissions with chmod, which stands for change mode, and then the formula for that is the chmod, and then the permissions you want to give it, and then the file name you want to give those permissions to, or directory you want to give those permissions to. And so I use the numeric, which is numbers 1 through 7, and it tells you which permissions to give which users.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
For a bash script, I don't think there's any point in having execute if you can't read it.
See, I disagree. I just want people to do what I tell them to do, and they don't need to know how it works. You don't need to know how the sausage is made.
No, the bash, if it can't read it, can't execute it.
The bash?
The bash is going to be interpreted by, I mean, the script that you create is going to be interpreted by the calling bash, whatever. And if you can't read a bash, you can't execute the bash. We can test it, or you can move on, but I'm just making a comment right there. I don't think the 7.5 is okay, but I don't think the 1 is useful without a 4 to go with it.
Making it a 5.
Making it a 5, yeah. I think those things are almost always created. Well, let's see. When you build a script, you always have to manually go back and Chmod it so it's executable.
We can test it at the break.
Yeah, we can test it at the break, and I'll just make this other comment and then we'll move on. So for a binary, even for a binary, you kind of be able to read the binary to execute it. So we'll test this later, but for Bash and Perl and any of the other interpretive languages, I think you need to be able to read them to execute them. But you're right, it would be nice if you could hide the information and allow other people to still use it. But go on with your...
Oh, you can do that.
Many other ways.
Yeah, you can do that. That's not that hard. You just...
It's not obvious.
It's not obvious, and you don't do it with this.
And I just realized that was fat fingered and was supposed to be 4.
Okay, so lower level question. So if I say chmod like X, right? So over there you have like X, W, and R as the symbols for like read, write, and execute, presumably. So can you put like a combination of those and have it work? Do you have, like up in there you're using the number codes.
We'll
Well, you
define work.
can. You can.
Will it accept it and set the mode? Yes.
It works.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do any combination. It may not do what you want to do, but I mean, if
It'll accept it.
you do the correct combination, it'll do what you want.
But the order they're presented in there, RWX, read, write, execute, that's the way it's always displayed when you do a listing. So you'll never see it as WXR or something like that.
Right.
They always come out in that order. So it's either going to be an R in the leading position or it's going to be a dash in the leading position.
Yeah.
And same with the other two.
Thanks.
And then this is just the way that I use. There's also, you can change mod symbolically, and I put a link at the end to a reference if you want to check that out a bit more. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in, about file permissions and that.
It's easier to remember the symbolic one.
And
As
if
long
you
as
know
you're
binary,
throwing,
you can figure out the numbers.
as long as we're throwing comments in there, I found that the best explanation for file permissions is in the info things and not the man pages. And it's kind of hard to find, but it's under I think it's under the core utilities, and they have a really good description of file permissions. So you might want to remember that when you're showing other people. Okay.
And then this was supposed to be an example, but technical difficulties. So this is the control structures in Bash. When I learn a new language, I want to learn about 4 things: how to do a print statement, how to do an if statement, and for loops. So like my big 3. From there, I can just go and kind of learn more and do other stuff. Those are the 3 that I need to know to feel comfortable using the language. That's what we're going to go over. This is the print statement, hello world. We use echo to behave like a print statement, and then I like to do the -e because that allows me to use escape characters, such as like /n or /n. I do a lot of new lines. And then the $sign refers to the first parameter passed in when you execute the bash. So you can say, hello, friend, or whatever you want to say.
And the later version of Bash, I believe, has a print statement, which is a little different from the echo statement.
Print that. Is echo a
Print
statement or an expression?
Command.
It's a statement, but it doesn't return anything. It just has the side effect of causing
Right.
the print.
Actually, I think
It will have a return code. It's almost always 0, but I guess if you screwed up the syntax wrong enough, it might not be.
Yeah, everything has a return.
It's $? Question mark, and if they just code the last line.
Right. I think your next slide is an example. I think that'll make it clear.
However, again, I'm going to make the comment that the normal location for bash is in bin, not user bin.
Yep.
And so that example there won't work on some systems.
Well, you have to adjust it as needed.
Back on your slide with shebang, she had it both ways.
Okay.
Saying it's distro dependent.
Distro dependent, thank you.
So you do which bash to know which one you need on your system?
Exactly.
Yes.
We're doing ENV.
Yeah.
So this is variable declaration. Fourth one. Yeah, it's the fourth one. I haven't encountered any programming language that doesn't use variables.
Shebang.
Yeah.
Shebang.
Did you see that one? That came right out of thin air.
You've not encountered any programming language that what?
I have not personally encountered a programming language that doesn't have some sort of variable to variable declaration.
I don't think there is one.
Yeah. So I said most because there's like people make their own programming languages all the time. There's one for emojis where you can write code in emojis. So maybe some obscure ones, but the big guys will all have variables.
Does the emoji language have variable declarations?
I haven't looked that deep into it. I kind of imagine it exists. But my mom likes to send me just emojis, and I feel like I'm reading Egyptian hieroglyphics. Like, what does this mean? What do you?
Please translate.
But what you need to know is in Bash, you can't have spaces in the variable declaration, and what that means is like between friends equals, and then what my variable is, $x. You can't have spaces. Other languages, Python you can have spaces, Java you can have as many spaces as you want. Bash, no. You have to like hug each other, because they're friends. And then this one is just saying hello, and then exterminate for your dog, if you're the doctor, and that's it. This is another one is the if statement. So in Bash we use brackets for commands. We use double brackets so we can use basically so we don't have to escape things. So if you were doing like string 1 is greater than string 2, if you had single brackets you'd have to escape the greater than, and the double brackets you don't have to do that, which is really cool. If you're more interested in that, I linked to a really good YouTube tutorial course. It's all free. And so this one is just saying if the parameter we're passing in, other important things. After the double brackets, we have the semicolon, space then. So we have if, statement, and double brackets. Semicolon, then we have our little else statement, and we have the end if statements with the fee. All documented there, and so what this is going to do is it's going to take in a parameter of someone's name, or it could be anything, but if that parameter equals Gary, we say, hi Gary, thanks for inviting us to present, and then if not, it just says, it's lovely to meet you. And I did have one where you can do like an else if as well, so I had one which was like else if my friend Ryan, who were just kind of mean to each other, it's like, if it's Ryan, I say, ew, really, Ryan? But he's not here, so I can't make fun of him.
It says brackets require padding with a space.
Oh, yep.
That space goes where?
So the space is going to go in between.
The test.
Yeah, and
Okay,
that's
so
just
if you've got single brackets, you have to have that space there, where double you don't.
double spaces. You do need the space. Double brackets. You do need the space.
Single brackets, you also need the space.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a case where you don't. I can't. Yeah, you always, that'll drive you crazy if you don't think about it. I saw a discussion in that. Gosh, I wish I could.
Single brackets allow the use of double equals and not equals, but I think you're probably right on the greater than sign. That the single brackets and the greater than sign is going to be confused about output redirection.
Yeah. It has to do with what kind of symbols you're going to have in there. And God, within the last 6 months, I saw a beautiful discussion of this, and of course, I have no idea where I saw it. But yeah, it depends on what symbols you're going to have in there. Some of them are commands, some of them.
I was going to ask a smaller question.
Oh, okay.
So,
No, go ahead.
how do you know that, like, how does it know that the dollar sign is going to have an argument? Like, so this is now changed from a script in your previous slide, which just printed something out by rote, and now you're accepting a parameter.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
The other one accepted a parameter too.
If $1 is null,
Or no, it has a parameter.
if $1 is null, then it's just telling you to do the else then, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to complain.
No,
It'll
no,
think
yeah,
that it's
you
an
can,
empty
you can
string.
use, a name that doesn't exist and it'll just evaluate as blank.
So false.
yeah.
I mean, if you don't give it a
Or is the
parameter.
question, where does it notice that name? The idea of that parameter is when you run this command, you're going to run it by saying whatever you save this command as, space, in this case Gary or Ryan, and by saying command space Gary, it'll come up and it'll give the first option. If you say command space Ryan, it won't.
A shell script will normally accept, I think, up to, depending on, I think it's up to 10 parameters. And $0 is the name of the shell script you're running. $1 is the first parameter you put after that. You do say this is program.sh. You say program.sh space Gary, and it'll pull that in this $1. And you can give it up to, normally up to, I think, either 6 or 10 parameters.
So I think you can go above that, but you only have names for the first.
Well, it'll,
Nine.
you have to,
If you shift
you
it-
have to rotate
Yeah.
shift kind of thing.
If you
It gets
shift it out, then
complicated,
you
but
can get the others.
by default, it's the first 6 things you put after that program.sh, and we execute it. It gives you an opportunity to have put in multiple variables into your shell script. So, isn't that convenient and complicated? Yes.
Yes, it is.
The example was really helpful. I was going to talk through a little bit.
Yeah. Not being able to run your example is it's kind of lost in translation, I guess.
I'm not familiar with the double brackets, more familiar with the single brackets. I know that with the single brackets, you have to protect that $1 inside of quotes, because if you don't pass in an argument, then the $1 will evaluate to a blank, and you'll get a syntax error.
I think that's the same here.
Can you say it again? I didn't understand this.
If the $1 is not passed in, it'll be null, and that'll be a syntax error.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll have to put quotes around it, and it will just resolve as a zero-length string.
Gotcha.
And you can compare the strings.
Yeah.
That's what I was curious about. If you don't give it a parameter,
And actually, don't you have to wrap Gary in double quotes there?
I thought you had to, but again, I'm not familiar with the double bracket
Yeah.
syntax.
You definitely have to wrap Gary in double quotes there.
If it's a single bracket, I believe. The double bracket changes that, if I remember correctly. That's why this example would work. Without
That might be, is better for handling string pairs.
Yes, I think. It's, I've forgotten what I learned this morning, so it's kind of hard to
Code and give
remember.
it a try.
And I don't know what's on the next slide, but as far as the equal signs, it's backward from what you would think. You use algebraic equal signs when you're comparing ASCII characters, and you use
numbers.
the ASCII dash GT and dash LT when you're comparing numbers.
Yeah.
It's backwards.
The operators aren't over that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was painful at one point in my life.
Many.
This is a for loop, and we're still sticking with our hello. In this one, we've just got our group of friends, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and we want to say workflow to each of them. So similar to how you would in Python, you would say for I and list do. We do in Bash, so we have that. Our friend the semicolon do echo, and then we finish it with done, which is personally I love. So this is just going to go through that list of friends, and then the $sign friends is calling that list variable for that each friend. It's just going to go new line, hello Harry, hello Ron, hello Hermione.
You compared it to Python, which I do not know. In Perl, all variables always have a $sign in front of them all the time. In Bash, when you're evaluating a variable, you stick a $sign in front of it. When you're assigning the variable, you don't stick a $sign in front of it. How does Python behave?
Python is a little bit of the Wild West.
Don't need the
You can
$sign.
do
At
it.
all. You don't need $signs at
No,
all.
they don't use
Right.
$signs in that.
So
Python.
Perl's like PHP.
You do need them if you would need them for disambiguation.
Okay, but again, to repeat for Bash, when you're assigning it, you don't want a $sign. When you're evaluating it, you do want a $sign.
Speaking of disambiguation, do you show dollar squiggly brackets in here at some point?
They were on the previous slide.
Okay.
You need braces? The ones like that?
Yeah.
We talk about function declaration
That's
with.
unambiguously say,
Right.
It follows.
Carolyn, you got a question over here?
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Sometimes
it's not immediately obvious that Harry, Ron, and Hermione is composed of multiple parts. Like if you gave me this and just asked me, without hearing you say what it does, what the expected result would be, I would expect the result to be hello Harry, Ron, Hermione, not 3 separate printouts. So is that something that you can like change that it knows, or is it just like implicitly universally understood that a space means it's a new thing?
I'm actually not sure.
Do you talk about IFS and OFS? Okay. There are default. IFS stands for input field separator, and OFS stands for output file separator.
Field.
And there are defaults for those. IFS is tab or space.
Yep.
And OFS is space by default. Those are built-in variables that you can print or assign if you want to. So you could set IFS to semicolon and put Harry semicolon Ron space Hermione, and then whatever. That's a word that doesn't exist. And then if it's a semicolon, it will split it into 2, but if it was a space, it wouldn't. So,
Thanks.
And you need to remember to set that back or you screw up a lot of stuff.
yeah. And typically when you're done, you just do IFS equals and don't assign it to anything, and then it sets it back to the default. You essentially unset the variable, and then it behaves normally again. That's useful for looping over CSV files.
It's also very handy when you're trying to deal with file names with spaces in them.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to deal with it is change the field separator. It's not going to be a space.
The person did.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Windows already.
Yeah.
There's a nice little program that's available from some of the repositories called Detox. It will take the spaces out of your file names. I use it consistently, all the time.
I just
I've
password
read,
change them when I can.
I've read things where people wrote commit scripts for subversion to keep you from checking in files that have spaces in them. Because it's evil.
Evil.
So we can use functions in Bash. Just the big things to know is functions must be declared before they're called. And then here the last line is calling the function. Say hello with the given parameter world.
You can do it. You gotta escape it.
Now you got me wondering the difference between a function and a subroutine. I thought I did some bash program today, and I thought I used the keyword sub instead of the keyword function. They may be interchangeable, or they may have different behavior.
Does function and return value and whatnot?
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
while
yeah.
we're talking about functional and its functions, are the functions first class? That is to say, instead of having world there, could I have passed another function as the argument, and then have my say hello function apply my new function to something?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You can pass function names in variables.
Bash evaluates the variables before it evaluates the line.
And then this is another way to declare functions with parentheses and curly brackets.
Actually, that's the way I did it today. Right? Instead of using the keyword function, I used the brackets, the parentheses. That's what I did.
Yep, they're both valid.
So I stand corrected. The keyword sub is for Perl.
I think bash, I'm just looking at the man page, I think bash means a function, like you've described it there, or it could be, what was that?
Do you have an example with multiple functions in one file, one script?
I do not.
What's that?
I do not.
Okay.
On this one, I think there might have been one of the examples.
It's a one-pass read, so you can declare it where you can use it.
Then I've always done that with function.
Call them functions, which implies that they return a value. We won't get into that today, David.
That's a different.
Returning values from subroutines is an art in itself in Bash.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
It's not hard.
Yep, and this was for entry-level developers with
Right.
common.
We won't get into that today.
Let me talk about that. There was going to be another example, but what is Vim? Magic. But it's, in essence, it's just a text editor. It's an advanced text editor, but it's still a text editor. You can do some really awesome things with Vim. I'm like in the pool of Vim. I'm still like on the top step of the baby end of the pool. But I was really intimidated by Vim at first, and then I just kind of started using it, and that was the best way to learn.
And now you're wearing it right here.
I am. This is up, down, right, and it.
Oh, okay.
There's some really awesome books, and then I've also, in the resources, there's like a cheat sheet of if you're just starting out learning, I need to do this thing, it's all right there. It's a really cool resource. And then how to exit Vim. When I was a TA at Launch Code, and when we were starting Git, people would get into Vim and freak out and just close their terminal all the way. And when I showed them these 3 commands, which when you're starting out is just QA exclamation point, oh, you're magic. Yes,
What is the A?
Huh?
What is the A
Yeah, I
part?
thought it was just Cubang. What's the A?
Yeah, I've always done Cubang.
Yeah. I've always done QA bang. I'm not sure
Oh,
what it
it's
is.
Quit it.
All.
What you quit
Yeah.
that pen?
But all?
You know,
Oh, multiple files in the buffer.
if you have multiple files in the
Oh,
buffer,
okay.
Quit
A
all.
will quit immediately
Quit all immediate, okay.
Instead of cycling you to quit that file and cycle you to the next one
Or
on
you
the
can,
list.
you can use the word quit all, or Q all, and it will do, I do that all the time.
Okay,
We have
I've
multiple
never-
things open.
That's a new one. So.
Didn't know you
Another
could.
question in the back?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I don't do that.
So if you had multiple files, buffers open, and you wanted to I guess my question was, is it possible to have changes in multiple files? So does that mean WA would save them all? And if that's the case, then WAQ would save them all and quit?
I believe you'd have to spell it WQA though.
I don't know that you can
Because
WA all at once.
You have to have all at the end, I think.
I've never tried it, so I'm just wondering
If I remember right.
I'm guessing that,
Still has names.
Let's go to the sheet.
Oh, somebody's got a cheat sheet.
One thing about this, every time I learn a new editor, the first command I want to learn is how to quit without saving.
How to get out of here, yes.
Right, that's one time I violated that and
Didn't like that, did you?
total disaster.
So in the politically incorrect world, you're not supposed to ask people what religion they are. And, we're going to do that anyway. So we're going to have a show of hands. What religion are you?
Emacs.
You use Emacs?
Yes.
Emacs people, raise your hand. Come
That's
on.
the only real
Vim
editor.
is the only one I don't use.
And
Other than that, I'm agnostic.
so the world is basically divided into Emacs users and Vim users.
Everybody
Are there
else,
people
yeah.
who grew up on Microsoft land and use Notepad or
Use
whatever else?
Nano.
But, pardon me?
Nano.
Nano.
That's the one that
Nano,
killed me.
yeah.
I actually just use plain VI, unless I'm using Vim without knowing it.
Usually,
And that does frequently happen because on a lot of
most distros install
Linux
Vim
systems now,
and
the VI
Just
just
the
is a
alias.
link to Vim. So.
As far as I know, the commands are
But I don't think it
exactly
is on
the
my
same.
system because,
Mostly.
I forget which way it is. It's like
Vim
Vim knows
do all
how to
VI
read tar
commands
balls
that you
and
expect.
VI
Vim
doesn't.
has additional
Okay.
commands that
Oh, when you open it up, it'll give you the list of files.
Yeah.
there, and you can navigate it, yeah.
That's interesting.
once I got the hang of it.
So what we're basically talking about is VI was traditionally a editor that came with Unix systems, and then, somebody correct me, was it simply to get around the copyright that Vim was written, or was there?
No,
No,
no.
VIM stands for Visual Interactive. It was the visual extension to ED.
Well, that's
That's
VI.
VI.
That's VI.
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 Vim is VI improved.
Yeah,
Right, okay.
So it's just,
VI is the visual extension to ED.
correct.
I wasn't going back that
No,
far.
it's
but
not the
the
visual
difference between
extension, it's
VI
the visual
and Vim-
interface.
And if you-
VI is the visual interface
Yes.
Right.
to ED. VI, visual interface.
Yes.
But anyway, it basically came down to, in the olden days, you literally could not get a Linux or a Unix computer of any kind. Like you were talking about compiling the kernel earlier, you basically would have had to have built your own system to eliminate VI or Vim. It was just always in there, which made it so whatever machine you walked up to, you knew you could get in there with VI.
Well, that was one reason why everybody always learned VIs, because that one's always there.
And then you got people like Steve who immediately go, get that thing out of my way, I'm going to do this in Emacs instead.
I never get rid of it, I just slap Emacs over the top of it.
What if you don't have permission to install stuff?
You don't need it for Emacs.
You
don't-
can install it in your home directory.
All you need to do to run Emacs is you take the directory tree that they give you and you drop it someplace in the file system. Emacs is built so that when you run the executable, when it goes looking for all of its other bits and parts,
Around the tree.
it goes right back to that tree and down. It never looks anywhere else.
And I'm sorry, Carolyn, I should have never gotten into the religious wars here, but where I was going with that, though, is to say that not only on a Linux or other Unix-style box, but you can also get Vim
But yeah, that's how you
to
get
put
around
on
that.
Microsoft Windows as well and run on Microsoft Windows.
Yeah.
Git bash is what LaunchGit has their students use. It's a nice little Linux terminal. It has Vim, and really it's just to get people used to the command line and not have to
Remember
use
Corn Shell?
Or is it Power? I don't even use it enough to know
Let's
the
see
proper
that.
name. Remember the proper name.
Yeah, I never really got the hang of it.
It'd be really bad.
And
Well, if you were...
my launch code teaching assistant when I took the course was a big fan of Vim, so we were indoctrinated into that cult. And then there was an example. It's on GitHub. There's a link at the and so yeah, these are tutorials that when I was, so I didn't mention it, I learned Bash in 3 days I was given an assignment, and like, write this script. Like, okay, what's the script? Cool, know what that is. Okay, like, what am I writing? It's like, okay, gotta build a doghouse. That's cool. What's a dog? So yeah, I had a crash course in shell scripting in about 3 days, and it was interesting. And so these are some of the resources I used, and then this is the video. It's a Russian guy. He's pretty solid. It's about 10 or so videos. He goes really in-depth into shell, but specifically bash scripting. And then there's the page on file permissions that I found that super, really, really nice, very visual. I'm a visual learner. So yeah, and then a little bit about Vim and the Vim cheat sheet that I keep in my bookmarks bar, just in case I need to remember how to do something. Go in there, Control F.
By the way, I love the cheat sheet. I mean, having a good cheat sheet's always just interesting to read through. You read through them and you go, ooh, wait a second, let me try that. I didn't know it worked that way.
Emacs cheat sheet is a book.
Fantastic. Any more questions for Carolyn?
No, they don't.
All right. I got a question for you. So, I don't know how long you've worked for Mastercard, and I think probably it's been over a dozen years. Do you remember when Mastercard moved out of this building?
2001.
Oh, that's
I
definitely
was on
over.
the 6th floor up there.
Okay, you're on the 6th floor. Okay, so was that before your time?
Yeah, I've been there since September.
Oh, okay. So if you're feeling strange vibes, like, you know, your old boss or whatever it is, like, he could very well be in the building here somewhere. So, all righty. Well, thank you very much, Carolyn. Okay, sorry for the delay in starting this evening, unforeseen technical problems. So, as I said earlier, we usually do this as we call it the Oreo cookie version of a meeting. We do a presentation on the front, presentation on the back, general questions and answers, and announcements in the middle with a little break to give you a chance to stretch your leg. So this is that GUI Oreo Center at the moment. So I'm Gary Meyer, and I'm kind of the MC, president of the group. Let's see, if anybody's got any questions, suggestions for the group, if you can't grab me, basically everybody at the first two tables on this side are the regular attendees of the steering committee meeting. So you can grab any of them and give them a suggestion. Stan, the guy standing up, Stan, wave your hand. Stan always likes to figure out where people have come from. So if this is your first time here or you haven't been here in a while, just run by Stan and tell him that you saw this on Meetup, or somebody told you show up tonight, or why you came tonight. Let's see. Another announcement. Let's see. Wonderful. Let's see.
Yeah.
Coming up next Thursday. Anybody on the steering committee remember it's Ken Johnson next Thursday?
Who's Ken Johnson?
Go back to sleep. It is Ken next Thursday, isn't it? Steve?
No.
I believe so. I believe mine wasn't until the next month.
Okay. You remember what his topic is?
No.
No. Okay.
I can pull up the wiki real quick and see if we
Okay. You check on that while we talk then. Okay. Whoops.
Hold on. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, looking at our calendar, just odd things here that are on the calendar. By the way, this is not only partially announcements, it's also just kind of interesting things. So if anybody else has an interest or a comment on some of the stuff on the calendar, just speak out and say something. Things that happened already. Last week, Oracle came out with their latest release of Oracle Linux. Chrome came out with a new Chrome release. And NetBSD came out with their 8.1 release. So that was all last week. For some reason, there's a lot of big anniversaries, 75th, 40th, stuff like that. Last week, it was the 40th anniversary of VisiCalc, which was the first spreadsheet. Imagine a world without spreadsheets these days. Let's see. 80th anniversary of McDonnell Aircraft being founded, which of course also was a real computing company here in town for many years. Let's see, scroll up if you could, please.
Up or down?
Up, yeah, up or down. Which up am I talking about? Okay.
Here we are today.
Let's see, other things. Don't forget Father's Day, for those of you who have to celebrate it this coming week. Next Monday, there is an all-day event, basically down at the Microsoft Center down by
Cortex.
It's Office Developers Conference. It's a freebie. It's basically an 8 to 5 thing, so but you probably have to register before going.
Free food?
Pardon me?
Any free food?
Yep, there'll be free food. And yes, I can't justify why anyone would use Office 365 instead of LibreOffice, but being realistic, the world does have some inclinations that way. Let's see, other things coming
Gary.
up. Yes.
The Linux meeting is a presentation I will be giving.
Okay.
Docker 103 SSL certificates in containerized websites.
Excellent. Okay. Okay. Good.
That's next week's?
That's next week's, yes.
So that's
yeah,
the
Ken is pushed off somewhere.
okay.
So,
That's the Thursday, next Thursday, the Linux user group meeting, and it's actually Nick and Elaine is not here, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Quick insight into the meetings that this group runs, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. The ones in red are the ones that are actually put on or run by this group.
Our sponsored meetings.
Our sponsored meetings. Tonight's meeting, the second Wednesday, the third Thursday, both of those meetings are presentation style like this. The Thursday night meeting only has one presentation. The other ones are more hands-on. And let's see, where's the newbie log?
Third week.
Third week, there we go. So the newcomer log, and it's not just for newcomers, but the standing rule is whoever has the simplest question.
No, it's the newest guy in the room.
Oh, newest guy in the room, okay. Newest guy in the room. Newest guy in the room gets to ask the question, and basically they work on that until everybody's comfortable that they have covered that topic. And then
We have newcomers that have been coming for about 7 years now.
So and it's really amazing. Sometimes the conversations get very, very detailed. So yeah, it's a good meeting to go to.
And if we have enough people, we have one-on-one help for individuals. And Phil has helped out quite a bit with one-on-one installing people. He's even installed Linux on a Mac machine, and he's installed. He's got that working with a guy's printer. That amazing stuff. Phil knows hardware inside and out, and I would not know what to do with most of that stuff if either him or Gary McKee didn't show up. So.
Stanford.
I know this location has been moving around, and this says that it's at Prairie Commons. Is it back? Do I need to check someplace else to verify that, or is it at Prairie Commons on this 22nd, on the 25th?
I don't know. Go to the website link there, and it'll tell you.
Just jump over
Let's
there.
see. Stan, why don't you tell them about
625
Slack meeting after the Stan?
Yeah,
I'll be right back.
Where's the location?
So 625
GC, thank
is
you.
Prairie Commons.
Yeah, and up at the top on the right, there's a link to the Google map. So I usually try to keep that up to date more than anything else.
Let's see how many tabs I can open.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yay! Anyway, it's free. That plus the St. Louis Area Computer Club, which is usually the first Thursday of each month. Although in July it's going to be the second Thursday because the first Thursday is right around Independence Day, so
It
there's
is
a bit of a
Independence
problem
Day.
there.
Yeah. So
Good reason not to have a meeting.
It'll be the following Thursday on that.
Yeah.
Normally, it's, there you go, it's the second, it'll be the second, we'll have a back-to-back meeting there.
On the 11th.
On the 11th, yes.
Stan, anything else?
I've had a headache all day and I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, so hopefully it's not
Barometric pressure killing me.
And Gary's back. Gary, anything else before we
Let's see.
break this Oreo?
I don't think so. There may be a couple of other big anniversaries in there, but nothing of a good technical nature coming up that I know of. So,
Okay.
if anybody got anything else they want to point out?
I did not update it on the calendar, but I believe the 22nd of this month is like the 6th anniversary of Veracrypt being released. That's kind of what led me into doing this stuff. Although,
I think that's right. That's not on the calendar. Oh, one thing that was on the calendar, I think today is the 10th anniversary of HD TV standard. So 10 years ago today, the old TVs stopped working. So,
Stan, are you the second half tonight?
yes.
Okay, so 8:05, Stan will be talking about
Veracrypt.
Veracrypt.
fantastic.
Okay, water and ice are available in there. Unfortunately, the coffee maker did not work. So, or go down all the way to the lower level and keep turning left, and you'll find a small convenience area that has soda and chips and things. Please, if you get in the elevator, only use 3, 1, or LL. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere.
Well, it doesn't matter what they try then, does it?
No, but it will just sit there, so they will get confused
And frustrated, okay.
and worried, perhaps.
And pushing the buttons and nothing's happening.
Yes, exactly.
Push the alarm button.
And I should have asked, did anybody have any other general questions, since we kind of did these things out of order?
Where's the restroom?
Same place it always is. Out these back out to the hallway.
Right out the door.
Opposite.
Yeah.
Just straight
Go
across.
out the door you came in.
Okay, and we're here all night. I think everybody's back.
I'm back for a,
And only 2 minutes left.
Close enough.
All righty. So Stan Reichert is a familiar face for our group. He's been involved with our group for more years than I can remember. And our vice president and basically all around cook, bottle washer, and the man who gets things done. So thanks you for all those good things, Stan. We had another speaker lined up for this evening, and unfortunately his boss put him in an airplane and said, "You will be working out of town, and no, you will not be back next Wednesday night for the meeting." So Stan, at the last minute, got drafted to do a presentation this evening. And he actually had been working on it a bit before that, so he had some ideas on what he wanted to do.
Well, actually, this disclaimer is I have not been able to do any slides that I wanted to do for this show. Because I had such a headache this morning, I couldn't do it.
Okay.
And, but I think I remember what I wanted to say, and I can cover most of that. And I'll start out with a slideshow that I presented back in, let's see, what year was that? 2012. I did a presentation, very extensive, on an introduction to TrueCrypt. Veracrypt is what I want to talk about tonight, is based upon TrueCrypt. And I will, let's see this, where is it? Where did I put it? I didn't put it, that's the problem, okay? Anyway, if you go to that, on our main web page for this group, which is here, and I'm so far behind I had not even been able to update that web page. I'm the only guy that does the updates on these web pages, so as much as I complain that nobody else wants to, I just wind up doing it. But I failed to do it this month. I didn't put down Carolyn as being here at the base because she had been scheduled there before, and I had even had the code up there. Later date is today, in the introduction that she did earlier, and
This is still listing what was done last month, and since I was drafted earlier in this week, more or less Tuesday afternoon, I didn't get around to updating this web page. But like I said, on our past meetings, the 2011 presentation archive, I do have that link right there, and where is it? Right there. That's the slideshow there, and that's 38 slides. And my intention was to go ahead and do approximately the same number for Veracrypt. But it's good to cover the TrueCrypt stuff because Veracrypt essentially was a fork of the TrueCrypt. The TrueCrypt guys just decided after their system was audited and they found about 3 or 4 major flaws, they decided to get out of business. And they never did really say who they were. There's conjecture that they were employees of no such agency or other. But it was a very good tool, and it covered a lot of things. And I went in and talked about the definitions of encryption and secrecy and privacy and paranoia and all the other stuff that got involved with that. There's a nice little link that talked about all that. And does anybody here use TrueCrypt or Veracrypt at all? Okay. Which one do you use, Gary?
TrueCrypt.
TrueCrypt. Okay, I use it too. It also has the capability of encrypting the entire hard drive on a Windows machine and I believe on a Linux machine. I only use it for I don't do it that way. If you want to do a full disk encryption, I think LUKS is a better thing for a Linux box. But never having enough time to do anything, I've used TrueCrypt, and since the Veracrypt will translate the TrueCrypt stuff, I've been able to use that. So who uses it? Well, it can be used by businesses and military forces, government agencies, and those ones we don't like to talk about too much. But the idea is, conjecture has been that it was designed to help support the NSA people and our spies and so forth. So it never was the people that contribute. They never really did identify themselves, and that's probably partially why they got out of it. And they said, "Here's the code, just take and run it." Veracrypt kind of picked it up. You always got to remember who watches the watchman. So that's one point I like to make. If you want to put on your tinfoil hat, now's a good time. It really is. What it is, and this.
On that point, the takeaway from that was that, yeah, if this was done by NSA or somebody in the U.S. government, was the whole point of it that somebody in the U.S. government can decode this, and that there's a back door somewhere. And that was one of the things in the audit was other people, other than these anonymous authors, were really trying to figure out. It's like, okay, is there a back door that nobody knows about that you can get to? And it's never been used by civilian authorities. I mean, the FBI has never been successful in breaking a TrueCrypt encrypted disk, at least not that I know of.
Or at least they have said that they have never been.
They've never claimed that they've successfully done it. The only break in TrueCrypt of a TrueCrypt disk that I think has been reported was the South Korean case. And the thing there was the people who had encrypted the disk did a classic faux pas. Their passphrase was basically one of the mottos of the group. This goes back to World War II, where the way they broke some of the German codes were the fact that Heil Hitler appeared in every message. So yes, this group had used one of their favorite passphrases as their encryption key, and that's how the South Korean case got broken. But other than that, no one broke TrueCrypt. But there was always the question of, is there a back door to it that we don't know about?
Well, essentially, it was all open source anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the problem was you could get the open source, but then you had to go get some, I think, a compiler or some libraries that were hard to find, and it wasn't really kept up to date. But you know, they were kind of glad to get out of business, so they turned it over. It's being open source. So they just went. The Biography guys just went in and grabbed all that and said, "Hey, we'll just fix this stuff." And what they did was they fixed the 3 things that were found in the audit. They fixed that, and have made improvements since. So that's, you know, but essentially, virtually everything that I said in this slide years ago pretty much covers Biography. Except they've improved it now, and there's still an issue about the license, because they had their own license which was not recognized as a by the open source initiative for licenses, because it was kind of a little convoluted or whatever. But as I understand it, and I haven't been able to go back and check, but the Biography license, they have their own license too, which essentially says, if I remember, I just briefly scanning it, it says, we're basing our license on the fact that they had a license, and we really don't want to stomp on their license. But, you know, and there is a lot of argument about the license and so forth, but the thing is, those guys disappeared. It's like they're not going to come back and sue you for use of their code, right? You think? You know, because one of the reasons they said they were disappearing is they didn't want anybody to know who they were. Okay? So I think the licensing is not a really big issue at all, really. The issue is going to be, is the code any good? Does it work? Is there something in there that it's so well hidden that the normal person wouldn't find it? It's what they call obfuscated code or whatever. Yeah. So whatever, you know. And I haven't been able really to do as much research on this as I'd like to, because I got other things I want to do. But in general, what it is an encryption software for personal data. Boom. It's, you know, it does. You encrypt it. You can encrypt the drive, or you can encrypt the volume, or a partition, or a file, and you open it up and you dump stuff in there, and you close it down, and it's encrypted. You know, and the only known way to open it is with the passphrase, okay, which they figured out on the Korean guys. You know, that's the only way they got in. You know, and supposedly with TrueCrypt years ago, they were trying to. The FBI case that they talked about was that somebody gave them a file for some guy that was a drug dealer in South America or something like that, and they said they worked on it a year and couldn't crack it. So who knows?
How does it provide plausible deniability, and 2 levels of that? Well,
I'll get to that. It's in this slide right here, okay? And the Biography does the same kind of stuff that TrueCrypt did, you know. And, you know, they have a user guide and so forth, and it does the on-the-fly encryption. And it encrypts the data before it writes it to disk. So when you open the TrueCrypt or Biography file, it actually does the encryption before it writes anything to the file. But if you've got something that wasn't previously encrypted, well, then there's remnants on your disk somewhere of that file, possibly, that a forensic expert could go in and pull up. So if you want to do something encrypted, you pull it in from an external source, and not from your an unencrypted portion of your current machine, or you create it in your current machine within the encrypted file system or whatever. So that it only decrypts the encrypted data after it is read from the disk. It does not. It's not invisible. You know, so there's a file there. There has to be. Now, it will encrypt the names of the files within that folder. Okay, so I can't see that. But it doesn't protect you from any kind of compromised system. And there's there's 2.5 pages of other things that it does. It's listed in the help file, and they have updated the help file with the Veracrypt stuff. You can use it on Windows and Mac and Linux machine. And these features were added later on. Originally it was only a Windows program, and later on they started setting it up with Linux. And when you use it, you should use it when you're transporting data on a thumb drive. And I went into some detail of how to really do that well with this presentation, but I haven't gone back and actually fleshed out all the details in the slides on how you should do that. But when you've got sensitive data on a laptop or desktop, it's good. But for U.S. citizens, when you're visiting some foreign country, it's not a good idea because they're going to, in some countries they may throw you in jail. And possibly when you return from a foreign country, our own Border Patrol is going to want you to decrypt what you got there. Okay? So, you go someplace else, don't use it. And why use it? Well, it's free and it does security, privacy, and it's multi-platform. It runs on different operating systems. And a nice point here, if it was the norm, it would reduce the irrational association of guilt. Now, why are you encrypting something? Have you got something to hide? Really,
Okay,
there's
which
this thing
is why the TSA wants to see see you unencrypted.
Well, TSA doesn't care. My son works at TSA.
They don't get paid enough to care.
Yeah, they don't. My
Oh,
son
well,
used to work for TSA, and
why
they
do
don't
they
care,
need to
and there's not enough
see it
smart people
unencrypted?
in TSA that really knows what to do, and they just want to get you through the line. That's all it
Well,
is.
but I mean,
Now-
in the slide before, they were talking about.
There's a customs.
That's
Yeah,
customs.
yeah,
That's
right.
not TSA. They're
Oh,
entirely
right.
different. Entirely different folks.
Different organization.
You don't
but-
want to. You do not want to mess with the customs guys. They'll throw you in jail in a heartbeat. if they-
PGP left
if
the
you want to.
country.
Gary.
He did, he left
Oh,
the country.
to that
Because the
point,
government wanted him to build a back
there was
door,
a
and he
dis-
was just, he had hair standing up on the back of his.
We can't hear you,
Just
Steve.
kinda gave him
Hey,
the-
Speak up so we can hear
Steve!
you. We're recording.
Yes,
this.
sir.
Can't hear you. What are you saying? Who are you talking to?
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
Worry about it.
Gary!
Okay. The 11th Circuit Court of the federal courts, the appeals court of the 11th Circuit ruled that you cannot be forced by the government to divulge what the passphrase is. So that's only good in Alabama, Florida, a couple of the southeast states, but it's not necessarily a precedent for all the other courts in the country. However, it's kind of the first ruling that's gone up that high that you can't be forced to divulge the passphrase. It kind of makes sense. It falls under the you can't be forced to give
Testimony against yourself.
Fifth
right.
Amendment.
But if you had a physical vault, the government has for decades has not been able to force you to give the combination to open the physical vault. As the Fifth Amendment, you don't have to testify against yourself. And what difference is this than a physical vault? So,
Well, there's a difference between divulging the passphrase or the combination, and I'm not going to tell you, but I'll dial it in and let you look in there. Do they insist that you open it and let them look inside?
Not without a warrant.
Not without a warrant.
Fourth
Thank you.
Amendment.
That's the correct answer.
well, even with a warrant, you can refuse.
What?
Yeah.
Being held in contempt.
Not in the 11th district. The 11th district says no, that would be forcing you
That
to
ruling
criminalize.
applies.
They can try to
Those
crack
those
it, but-
district federal courts, those rulings
Pardon?
apply over the whole country. Otherwise, people wouldn't always be taking stuff to the Ninth Circus out in California.
That's what I said. Currently, this only is precedent in the 11th Circuit, right?
It might be, but that ruling holds everywhere.
No, it doesn't. No, it's not a precedent anywhere other than subordinate courts to the 11th Circuit.
Right.
So you're saying warrants don't apply to what's in my safe?
That's
No.
my understanding.
They have a search
They-
warrant for my house,
they
but
can
they can't
take-
search my safe.
They can take the safe, and if they can figure out how to open it themselves, they can have whatever's inside.
Right.
They cannot force you to open it.
They could cut it open.
Unless you have a physical, hold on, unless you have a physical key. If it's a safe with a key, they can force you to produce the key. It's a physical item, it's not something you know, you're not testifying against yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not gonna tell you where the key is, but you can search the house and see if you can find it.
That is, again, that's perfectly legal. They can't force you to tell them where the key is, but if
And what if the safe is embedded in a wall in concrete? They can destroy my house and take it?
Yes.
yes.
Yes, they do that all the time.
I've seen stories of them doing some pretty destructive things to you.
It all depends how much they want to screw with you. And remember, they have infinite money and infinite time.
Yes.
Compared to
And
what?
if you have a cell phone where you've got a thumb print that opens it up, they can force you to put your thumb on there.
But,
If it's face recognition, they can put it in front of your face and open it. But if you don't use that, you just use a PIN number, they cannot force you to give the PIN number.
Exactly.
also, when it's first powered on, you have to use the PIN number to unlock the facial recognition
Depends.
and thumbprint.
Depends on the OS.
Ah,
Depends.
okay. I know on mine.
That's by default, but you can turn it off if you're really silly enough to do it.
Can you use this, let's say that you've got a blog that's just for you personal on WordPress. Can you use this to redirect it to your WordPress postings? and
You want to
et cetera?
encrypt it before you ship it up there. PI. Pre-internet encryption is the acronym. If you want to put something up on the internet, you should encrypt it before you ship it up there. Some of these outfits, they say, we encrypt your stuff. Well, they encrypt it once they encrypt it coming up, but they don't necessarily encrypt it while it's there. Okay, so they'll protect the transmission so that a man in the middle can't grab your transmission. But if you did not encrypt whatever you're shipping up there, once it's up there, if somebody cracks into their system, it's just sitting there unencrypted.
And I've seen other people do it the other way, where you'll ship it to them unencrypted, but they'll encrypt it once they get it. But if somebody gets to you in the middle, then you're also in trouble.
Yeah, sure.
One other question on that. You had raised a question in the back door, or you raised a question in the back door. I use PGP, pretty good protection for whatever
Privacy.
it is.
Yeah, pretty good
And
privacy.
I mean, that guy went to hell because he wouldn't
Yep.
open the back. He
Didn't
And a lot of what we have now, like the 11th Circuit decisions, are thanks to him.
Yeah.
Bill Zimmerman was his name.
Yeah.
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 Did he not leave the country to finish his work?
I think he did.
Yeah,
He went to Israel.
yeah,
I don't know where he went.
Israel.
yeah. Yeah, that was back during the ITAR days.
It's a munition.
Yeah,
It's considered a munition.
yep.
Whatever. I'm not a lawyer. I don't really know. I repeat stuff I hear on the internet, and that's
Lawyers
always
don't.
true, right? So, I don't know.
I've never seen you wrong.
Only if it's on Wikipedia.
Yeah, then it's guaranteed right.
Yeah. I think I kind of touched on why you would want to use it and why you would not want to use it. Well, one of the big things is this allocation of guilt. Why are you hiding anything? That makes you an easy target for further allegations, and it's the institutional process. And I don't remember exactly what I was thinking about there when I put that there, but I'll remember it eventually. And you can shoot yourself in the foot. If you forget that password, you are out of luck. You are really out of luck. And if you don't follow the additional recommended security precautions listed in the documentation, which means keep your hardware, your system secure in other ways, somebody could get to your system and put in a keylogger, and when you put your password in to open it up, they got the copy of your password. So you got to watch out for keyloggers.
One of the beauties of Windows.
Basically, if your system's been compromised,
Yeah, if you've been compromised, you've been compromised. this was in some specific downloading things on TrueCrypt. I'll skip that background. Quickly, it was developed by what's called the TrueCrypt Foundation. It was these guys that nobody knows who they were. Released on Groundhog Day. I don't know. I think there must have been a personal reason for that. 2004. And it's got this TrueCrypt collective license, which is kind of an odd license. Anyway.
It's their own proprietary license?
Yeah, it's a unique license that, like I said, it's not recognized. I'm not a lawyer, so I had some references here. It is and will remain open source, yes. Is and will remain free software, yes. That's one of their promises in their license. The frequently asked questions guide in the user guide. It's not officially recognized by the Open Source Initiative. I forget how detailed that is.
How is it consistent with Stallman at all? Or?
No,
I don't.
Stallman hates it.
Yeah, yeah, and not, and, because it's not a free. It just says free. That there are. It's because there are restrictions. It's not. Stallman wouldn't be happy with it.
Okay. Too many
you
restrictions.
got that thing pointed. No, the first camera. Where's that pointed?
It's at the board, the screen.
Okay, thank you. And it's not free of any licensing issues per some Linux distributions, and that's, I believe, why Debian doesn't have it in there and others don't have it in their repositories. This was back then. It was first. There's a version history.
Stan?
Yeah.
So for Veracrypt,
I'll get to that. Yeah. But I think it's very important because a lot of this is so much the same. It's all based on the TrueCrypt stuff. So because of the license, it will never be a commercial version of that particular software. And they had a very small community, but the review was possible by real cryptographers if they contacted these people and made arrangements. And then eventually the independent review did find some bugs, and it caused them to kind of bail from the whole scene. Okay, didn't work on FreeBSD, although I believe that Veracrypt now does work on one of the BSDs, and they don't want to go all that way back with the Windows stuff. So there's different possibilities. You can do a file container, you can do a partition, or you can do the whole disk with the encryption. I forget the exact details on this. It's been quite a while. The file container, there's some of the references on it. I think that's pretty much the same with the Veracrypt. Okay, we'll get to the other stuff. Now here's the part about the plausible deniability. You can do a hidden encryption folder or file within a TrueCrypt thing. So you can hide something within it. So if you hide it within in a TrueCrypt or Veracrypt volume or file or whatever, there's nothing to indicate that there's something embedded within there. So the guys beat you up and say, open up your Veracrypt or TrueCrypt folder, and you give them the password, and they get into it, and they said, is there anything else in there? And you say, no, there's nothing else. I'm not smart enough to put something else in there. All right, or I forgot what I put in there, or I did, whatever. But that, XKCD, covers that very well. What's really going to happen is they're going to shoot you full of drugs and they're going to beat you with a wrench until you do give them the password. So if you're in that situation, you're out of luck anyway, right? So that's real life. If you got somebody that's really wants to get it from you and they're mean enough that they're going to do it, that includes nation actors and stuff like that, whatever. So, I did cover about the petition, so it develops. this part here makes more sense when you actually get into it. And the disk, encrypting the whole disk, the benefits of that, if your system is stolen, they can't see what's in there. And also another advantage is that when you go to decommission that hard drive, you don't even have to bother to wipe it. You just don't give whoever you're giving it to the password to get into it. They can't see anything, so they're going to wind up, unless they want to spend 178 years guessing what you use as a passphrase, they're not going to get into it.
And looking at the documentation, it's even hard to tell that it is something.
You can't.
It looks exactly like it.
It's designed to be completely random, so it.
Like, it looks like just random bits, like you would do if you
It looks like a file that got corrupted.
Or was written over with random bits to make
Right.
to cleanly erase it.
There's supposed to be no fingerprint that can identify it as a volume. That's what gives it the truth crypt, or the plausible deniability.
Looks like a wiped drive then.
Yeah, that partition just looks like there's nothing there.
Or or there's garbage or something screwed it up, and you gotta.
No, it's
No, it looks
designed to
like-
be. It's designed to be completely random, so
Yeah.
it doesn't even look like it was an old file system
Yeah.
that they could try to recover.
And they also have the feature that will write random data so that it really will be totally written, overwritten.
Yeah. If you encrypt random data inside your random partition,
I mean, they
I heard you like random, so I randomed your random.
if you want to clean a disk, it will write random digits on it.
Yeah, they use.
But you can't tell the difference between that and the
Right.
true crypt.
There's a commercial. I forget exactly how this portable mode worked together. What I was trying to say here, but it can't compensate for a compromised system. If you got a system that's got keylogger in it or some kind of virus that's doing something, you're out of luck. Especially on a Windows system. There's nothing you can do about that. It may leave some traces of activity, but not a big deal. On the thumb drive, what I set it up, I made sure that I had a thumb drive where I had a TrueCrypt container on it. I also included the Windows executable, so I could open up and put Windows on a Windows machine. Also included the tar file for the Biography to put it on another Linux machine in case I couldn't get up on the internet, pull it down, blah blah blah. It's just I think that's this benefit part right here is a little bit of repeating that above. Okay, there's no detectable headers on it that you like Chuck was saying, you can't tell that there's even there. There's no master key in there, so forth. There are other alternatives. That, Microsoft's got this bit blocker. It's proprietary, so you can't read that code. There's Apple File Vault. It's proprietary. You can't read that code.
Definitely wouldn't trust
McAfee
Microsoft.
endpoint encryption is proprietary. You can't read that code. There's a dmcrypt for Linux, it's GPL. There's also a thing called Lux. I think that dmcrypt has been renamed to Lux, I think.
Lux is the distro that uses that.
LUKS?
Yeah, that's the distro that dmcrypt. It uses the.
Oh, okay. dmcrypt is okay. I had a link to some other programs there and comparisons.
And there's PGP and GPG, or is that just the disk encryption we're looking at?
That's just the encryption thing is stuff. It doesn't really hide stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't hide your file names. It doesn't put it in a container where you can't see it.
That's not for file system encryption. That's for file encryption.
Which is a good thing to do
Or
too.
string encryption.
Can be helpful. Yeah.
And this slide here was comparisons, and the idea was here is if you want to compare TrueCrypt or VeriCrypt to another thing, these are the kind of things you need to compare. You need to see whether or not the containers are hidden, whether there's any kind of pre-boot authentication. In their documentation, they talk something about custom authentication, but it wasn't clearly defined. They talked about multiple keys. You can actually have a setup where you can have a say like a corporate key and individual keys. So if you set it up initially with a corporate key, the individual can use his keys to encrypt stuff, say like on a laptop. So the corporate has a key that can get in there and wipe all that stuff or whatever. But the employee also has his own key that he can get in and do stuff with the TrueCrypt or VeriCrypt.
So,
Yes.
in other words, can the individual then decrypt it, but the corporation can only erase it? Or-
No, it can. I didn't look. Okay, I don't really know. But the idea was that a corporation could decide that we're going to put TrueCrypt on all our laptops. Okay, well the individual's got to have access to it too. But apparently the corporation also has access to it. I imagine it would be a matter of policy, but where the individual will say, okay, that's really neat. Let me go ahead and just wipe the whole thing entirely and start over again. I guess that could be done. I don't know. I didn't delve into it.
Mind blank.
Or
It's like
the
having-
corporate key might work on my laptop and your laptop, but you have an individual key
Yeah.
for yours. And I got-
It's a master keys.
Okay.
It's a master keys.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay.
the word. That's what
Yes.
I meant. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's
Okay.
so the corporate has a master key, and then you have your own keys.
Gotcha.
You can't get into somebody else's laptop. They can get into everybody's.
Yeah.
And they can probably do more to it than you can.
Depending on the policies, yeah.
I don't know.
And there's a number of them where you can have multiple keys. So I have a key, I have a key, and you have a key for the same machine.
Right.
But they're different keys, so I can revoke your key, or the policy could revoke your key. Depends on how much you want to pay for a lot of the.
Yeah, but anyway, the
Custom
purpose
one.
of this slide was the things that you need to compare between whatever you're thinking about using and what else is available. So you want to compare TrueCrypt or VeriCrypt against everything else out there, whether or not it's does the hidden containers and whether there's password strengthening and multiple keys and how it affects the hardware responses and so forth, and whether or not it does two-factor authentications. And I don't remember whether it does two-factor authentication. And I do remember for a fact this trusted platform module thing. In their documentation, they essentially said it's a joke. It's a marketing.
Two-factor authentication on the boot partition would be hard, because you got to get far enough to get to your second factor.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And this was features of, TrueCrypt, and I assume that VeriCrypt has the same stuff, or if not, well, it should, because they took the original source code. So whatever was in TrueCrypt is still in VeriCrypt. So they have hidden containers, and they have the pre-boot authentication. They did not use custom authentication because it wasn't clearly defined enough for them to really say what it was, or I didn't understand it in the documentation. They do not use multiple keys, or at least they didn't. I'm not sure what they do now. And essentially, the trusted platform module do not use. They say in the documentation, they actually say it's misleading and it's security theater. That's what they're saying. So, and I do believe two-factor authentication can be done with it to some extent. I don't remember. Like I said, I haven't really been able to delve into the VeriCrypt and understand.
Is that public-private keys?
Huh?
Is that the public and private keys? Two-factor authentication?
No,
No.
no, that's a different.
It just means you gotta have two passwords.
Well,
Or two things, something you know and something you have.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can use TrueCrypt with file must be present on your system, or at least something set. So what you could do is you could say it requires to have, in addition to your password, you have to have a file existing on your system named "This is my secret password key.txt." And it could be an empty file, but as long as it exists, then the system will say, oh, as a second factor, you've got that file existing on it. So what you do is you erase that file, and it's not there anymore. So you give them the password, it don't work. Because
And
it's
then
missing the file.
Then when you want it, you create the file.
Right. That seems kind of neat.
Mhm.
There's a few alternatives that are not recommended. I don't remember what I had here. It's been a while since I looked at this. And I went into a demonstration of that, and I listed some resources and stuff, and some learning resources. And going back to that, hang on just a second, there's a lot of Wikipedia stuff that's good background material. Interesting essay that talks about all that. And there was a TrueCrypt tutorial up there. That's fairly good. But the thing is, let's see, not on this thing. Security Now. Everybody here familiar with Security Now podcast? Anybody not?
Tell us about it.
Security Now. Twit TV, Leo Laporte, they do podcasts, and one of their weekly presentations is a thing called Security Now. It's done with Leo Laporte and Steve Gibson. Every week they talk about all the security things, the disasters and stuff like that. In the past, Steve Gibson has also done a lot of tutorials, very well done verbal. Essentially the idea is he likes to talk with although they do broadcast images of what they have there, he tries to present it strictly from a verbal standpoint and going through covering all kinds of things. And they're up to episode 712, I think, or something like that. So they've been going for about 14 years or something, I don't know, or longer. These specific episodes right here, at the time, were stuff that talked about TrueCrypt. Okay, and there's some possible further reading I thought was relevant. Things like the U.S. Constitution, Fourth Amendment. That might be kind of interesting if you're going to wind up using this stuff. There's in 1984. There's a nice book by a guy named George Orwell. Okay, anybody here not read that book?
Why am I thinking that the Fourth Amendment is about quartering troops?
That's 7?
No, it's the third.
Oh.
Okay.
And there was anyway.
Unreasonable search and seizure.
And this book has been republished. It's available out there. And every 5 or 6 years, I try to remember to go back and read that to remind me that the hero of the story is a guy named Winston Smith. And what he did is he worked for the government. Okay, and essentially by then there were essentially 4 governments. Okay, there was the Asian government, there was the North American government with Britain included, and there was African government, and there was Europe government. So he worked for him, and the whole idea was he worked for what amounted to was the information systems that people could access through the TVs that were in every room. That actually, not only you could watch stuff on it, it was always watching you. Okay.
Boy, that sounds familiar.
Why does that sound familiar? And he happened to have moved to an old house that he could sit in a corner, and it couldn't see what he had on his desk. Okay. And his job working for this government was to go back and alter history. Can you think of a guy that would go out and alter Wikipedia, or go and newspaper articles? He would go capture the picture and redo the picture to do like they did in Russia, where the guy was no longer in favor, they would black him out, And that was this guy's job. He was the hero. Okay, so it's always good to read 1984. Then there's another science fiction book called Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson. Okay, he's one of the renowned cryptanalysis or crypto workers out there. He works for, I think it's, I forget what university, but anyway, he's written that book, and it's about that thick. It's a really good book, and it's got 4 intertwined stories that talk about encryption and security. And one of the stories deals with a guy, he's a Marine in World War II, and he works for, his idea, he was wound up as a bodyguard for, who was that guy we were talking about the other day, Gary? One of the guys at
Turing.
Turing.
Yeah.
He was a bodyguard for Turing. Okay, and another story is later on, and these stories all intertwine with each other. And later on, it was I guess you would say a modern startup system, and they actually would go on to China or something like that, and they wound up that they found that in the hotels where they were, there was stuff embedded that was trying to break into their computer systems and so forth like that. And then there was another story involved where they were going out and supposedly all this gold in World War II, the Japanese came in the Philippines, and the Philippine government went out and hid their gold. Okay, and it talks about or somebody where they found the gold. Okay, you couldn't get in there by a helicopter, and you'd have to go in as an individual, and you could only take out one brick of gold at a time if you found it. And this was one of the secrets that was supposedly hidden, encrypted, or whatever. And the question is, how long do you, that I got out of the book was, how long do you want a secret to remain a secret? Okay?
Yes.
If it can only, if the encryption algorithm is only good enough that, say, 20 years from now, where they've got computers that can crack what you're doing now, do you want to invest time in encrypting something to use a larger key that's going to take longer to break, or not? If you've got something that's so secret it's going to take you 5 days of computer time on a massive computer to encrypt it, to save it, or is 2 hours encryption time good enough? So it's very important to realize that no matter what kind of encryption you're using, that scheme is only going to be good for so many years, and eventually they're going to come up with something that may break it. That's why you hear a lot about what they call quantum computing is going to change encryption forever. Maybe, maybe not. Is it a pipe dream?
He also talks about the problem when you decrypt the enemy's messages. How do you act without tipping them off that you knew what they were going to do?
That was a big problem in World War II.
That's exactly what he was covering.
Yeah.
There was, I forget, there was there's a number of instances where they didn't want them to the British didn't want the Nazis to realize that they cracked their code for the submarines. So, Project Ultra, and so they just happened to have, if they find out where their subs were going, they just would happen to have planes that just happen to come by and spot them. Okay. Ooh,
and the Coventry attack.
And the Coventry, yeah.
They just happened to have a drill going on in the area where they had a bunch of first responders there that just happened to be there ready to lend
was that the town where they lost 30,000 people?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It was disastrous.
You just had to let it happen.
Yeah, but they were able to respond quickly to rescue the people that survived.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's very difficult, very painful to do that kind of work.
Yeah. In addition, I think fiction and science fiction is a very good. Science fiction was defined as fiction that tells how we deal with technology, or we think we'll deal with technology. And the last two books are by my favorite current author called Damon and Freedom. Freedom is part 2. Is Damon essentially talks about this guy that was a renowned. He owned a gaming company, and he was big on gaming, and he was essentially he wound up with cancer, and he wrote a Damon program that when he died, that this thing that was out on the internet recognized that he had died. It started doing things. It started infecting companies, and it was so good that they couldn't block it. And essentially what it did was it went in and taxed all the corporations 1% of their income, and it started doing things with that income, like building those things that fly around. What do you call them? Drones that would go and do nasty things to people and whatever, and all kinds of stuff. It's quite a story.
And I will give away my favorite part of the middle of the book, of the first book. The very exact middle of the book, Damon, the computer thing, kills the top 30 spammers in the world. Eliminate spam because it was slowing down the Damon.
So yeah, we need to get that project going.
Well, hey, you know, I thought that was really neat. I was rolling on the floor laughing when I read that page. I thought it was great.
So it's Damon, D-A-E-M-O-N?
Yeah, and you can get it from the county library. It's
Oh, one more thing on Cryptonomicon.
yeah.
With his books, I've enjoyed reading them again.
Yes, yes.
And at 900 pages, my feeling is, I mean, that's typical length for his books. My feeling is typically that's a little short. It should have been longer. It ends too soon.
And the thing about Daniel Suarez's his books is that at the end he lists all the technology he has read about that gave him the ideas. So all of this stuff is possible. Everything you read in those two books is possible.
I think Stevenson has extensive references also.
Yes.
And he also has a volume that is just the references that he is. It's like a whole book of footnotes to his other books.
He gives an appendix where he tells you how to set up a encryption system with playing cards, I think.
Yes.
And it's entirely unbreakable.
Yes.
That's what I understand. So,
You have to have the card deck in the order that it was used,
yeah.
which means if somebody comes to seize the card deck, oops,
Yeah,
it's gone.
gone. Anyway, and he's got a number of other books recently. I just ordered one called Carolyn.
By the way, all that is a one-time pad.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
It's nothing new at all.
But it's a convenient portable one that can be
I don't know,
destroyed.
carrying a stack of-
Can be instantly destroyed.
I mean, you print out 52 characters this long on a piece of paper.
Oh,
I'm not sure which is more convenient.
But how do you shred it instantly?
But this
But
particular author, he's
the
got
card
about,
deck can.
Okay, you drop the deck of cards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there goes the pad. There is no pad.
Swallow the piece of paper.
but anyway,
It's been done.
Daniel Suarez, he's written about 5 other books that are really good with science fiction of technology. One, he talks about a 3-letter agency the government has got that their whole mission in life is to stop disruptive technology. Okay, and so the hero in the first chapter of that book, he figures out how to do anti-gravity, and they come in and they kill his crew, and they lock him up in prison and say, if you want to work with us, well, you can work with us, or we'll keep you in prison forever. And eventually, he finds out in the prison that there's been like 7 other guys before him that had found the secret to anti-gravity. And the government had been sitting on this stuff. Okay, that's one book he did. He did another book about changing your DNA. The hero of the story actually worked for the UN, and their idea was to stop DNA changes, and he was going around, and you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, because people wanted to change their children's DNA to make them smarter and more athletic and longer lived and stuff like that. Well, his job was to stop. There were certain categories that were allowed, certain things he couldn't do. He was supposed to go around and do that. And the start of the story, somebody infects him with a virus that changes his DNA, so his body winds up looking like the guy he's after. Oh God! And the technology is there are kits out there which you can go and buy right now. You can start manipulating DNA. There's no real law against a lot of things that he talks about in the book that maybe should be made illegal.
But some of the stuff, it's impossible to control, so it doesn't matter if there is a law.
Yeah, yeah. And that's essentially some of the stuff that he talks about.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting story. And the most recent book he's got is, I can't remember the name of it, I just got it in the mail yesterday. It talks about mining the asteroids. You know, so it's more likely that's a better route to take than to try to go to Mars and reinhabit that planet. Also, by the way, Neil Stephenson just recently has released another book too.
Mhm.
So I haven't known anything about that. Now, you should consider, okay, 15 December, a memorandum that used to be what's known as the Bill of Rights Day, and it still is, although, you know, if we don't have any Fifth Amendment rights or Fourth Amendment rights, what does it matter? You know, and at this point I would ask questions, but now what I'm going to go into is I'm going to talk about Veracrypt. It's already 9 o'clock.
So we'll save that for next month.
I could, or I could just point you to the. I got a 22-minute video. I think I'll just tell you where it is. I can remember where it is. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I don't have it on here. Or do I? Where is it? Oh, yeah. No. There's a website, and for the newcomers, the Linux users group, I give out a thumb drive that's got 30 gigs of videos on it and recorded files for some of these podcasts. And there's a website called goinglinux.com, and they have, I've got some of the audio files, and they also do video files. And if you go to goinglinux.com and go up there, you can find their video. It's episode number 8, right there. And it's all about Veracrypt. And it goes through and it talks about installing it. And this thing got sound?
Supposed to.
Okay, I
Today, I'm not going to make
Well,
any guarantees.
Yeah, after that nice lady had such a.
I may have to, I've been through this before where I have to go into,
Actually, since you're on the display port, it's probably not.
yeah, it's mute.
Oh, yeah, because it doesn't have audio.
Yeah, it's not HDMI.
Now on the system downstairs, that plays sound, but I have to go in and configure it.
But you'd have to be on HDMI for it to make a difference.
So you're saying that even if I configured
Yeah.
it right, it won't play?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because the DisplayPort adapter doesn't carry the audio.
So your computer speakers are what we'd hear.
Well, I don't have, the speakers on this machine don't play.
Oh,
Okay, looks like it's trying to.
Yeah, yeah, that's as much as we're
well,
going to
that's
get
the
out of it.
input, that's the internal
Oh,
microphone.
okay.
While Stan is working on that, for those of you who haven't been here for a while, we're normally down in the basement, which explains part of our confusion with this and the projector earlier this evening is this is usually our backup room up here, but our regular room is doing something else tonight, so we got booted.
We're in the backup.
Booked our room?
Pardon me?
No, actually, I prefer this room.
Oh,
We're going to get used to it.
Okay.
Well, we need to get the sound figured out.
Yeah.
No, the sound works. If we had HDMI working, the sound does work.
So we just have to get
No,
HDMI.
because it worked. It worked before we started.
Mhm.
I've had that problem with other projectors around here. I think it might actually be something with the ThinkPads. HDMI will refuse to work, but the DisplayPort will keep working.
Mhm.
Well, anyway,
Anyway.
if you go to goinglinux.com and the episode number 8 video is what I was going to throw out here for 22 minutes. It goes completely through installing and actually shows you how to use it, and very good. And it looks virtually the same as the TrueCrypt stuff, and it will convert the true. You can use it will read the TrueCrypt containers and files and so forth, and you put the password, and it it opens them up and just fine. It works just like the TrueCrypt does. And then you can actually convert it to their format for, if you want to, or you don't have to, if as long as you know the password, it'll work. Okay, there's a couple other things I want to talk about before I finish up here. That video goes, it references going to a particular site that is no longer used. If you go to that site, it actually says it's migrated to here. It's in France. Okay, instead of following the description that's in the video, which talks about this site and their purple buttons. Okay, you just go to this site and it's a little bit better, and you go down here to this section here to for the downloads, and that's where you pull the downloads, and then we got links to other tutorials, which are really good if you speak German or French. Okay, so I haven't looked at these or whatever, but that the little tutorial works well enough that you probably don't need these other tutorials. And besides, when you've got it installed, and I went through and it pulls down a tar file that you extract, and let's see here. See, there's the video running there. And it tells you how to decide whether you're using a 32-bit or a 64-bit machine or whatever. So, once you get this part and install it, it's very good little tutorial. Okay. And let's see. I wanted to say about if you go to the links that talk about the TrueCrypt, when those guys failed, they made their last iteration of the binaries. Well, all it did was unencrypt your TrueCrypt files. You could no longer encrypt anything. Well, Steve Gibson had captured that stuff beforehand. So if you want to use TrueCrypt in its actually functioning form, you go to Steve Gibson's site at grc.com, and he's got the original, or copies of the original binaries, so you can install that. But at this point, you just as well do the Veracrypt, because they took all that source code and redid it, and it does all that. Plus, then they started fixing all the things that were found in the audit. Okay, so those were the two things I wanted to talk about, the two different sites. So whatever, I'm done. Any questions that I didn't? Oh gosh. Okay.
Mine's simple.
Okay.
Is your presentation on that USB that you gave me last week?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, actually, the
2012?
Item 8 of the goinglinux.com, it is on that disk. It's in there, so you can go watch that and listen to it.
So the video's on there. The presentation that you just went through this evening is the
It's
old
not.
one from 2012, and it's on the Sloop website.
Yeah, that's on the Sloop website, but what I've done tonight is, we're recording it now, so that may never show up. I don't know. It depends on how much either one of us do, either Don or I do. Don, you had a question.
Yes. ZDNet has an article, October 19th of 2016, about critical flaws in Veracrypt, but as I read the article, it sounds like maybe they're not so critical and can be worked around for the most part.
And, give them a week or two and they'll fix all that.
This is 2016, so I'm wondering, maybe they've been fixed or they documented
you
how
go to the website and they list a whole raft of stuff that they fixed in the last couple of years.
Okay.
They fixed a whole bunch of stuff in September, I remember that. And if there's anything else that's popped up, they may have already fixed it. I don't know. But,
Since this is 2 years old. And
yeah.
2.5.
Okay. That's part of
open
the
source.
problem about the internet. It's a moving train, and you gotta know where the last train stop was and when it was. I absolutely hate websites where they show this stuff
and they don't tell you when they posted it.
And this article should have addenda on later news on the topic.
Some of them, you know.
Some do and some don't, yeah.
Some of them don't allow comments, some of them they'll turn off comments.
I mean, I'm
Some
thinking
of
the
them
authors,
comments.
the authors should revisit it and do
Yeah,
corrections.
And there are some websites that are good about revisiting things.
Mhm.
Just to take a step back and get the bigger picture again. So the idea of encrypting a system disk still only works for Microsoft operating system, correct? Even in Veracrypt.
I don't think so.
I think they've gone beyond that, I think.
Mhm.
I don't know.
And that now you can have a
The thing
Linux
is,
system
I've
disk?
never taken the time to try it out. And, you know, I found that just creating an encrypted file is sufficient,
Okay.
you know. And matter of fact, I made a little encrypted file of cat pictures if you want to look at it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Had to practice on something, huh?
Yeah.
When you say encrypt a system disk, I mean, when you talk about Linux, you're mostly encrypting partitions, right?
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah, and now that /boot is its own standalone partition, you can encrypt everything but /boot.
Yeah, you can't, yeah, /boot has to remain unencrypted so that the UEIF crap can be dealt with. Thing. It's all getting too complicated for me. It makes my head hurt. You know.
Well,
So this says encrypts a partition or drive where Windows installed for pre-boot authentication. So it sounds like the system disk would only be in Windows.
Yeah, and I've heard recently that if you're going to encrypt a Linux, you want to do that LUKS encryption instead. Because it's what's the word? It's more efficient. Whatever. I don't know.
yeah, at work, my new laptop they issued me is a Windows 10, and I get the impression they did something, Microsoft cooperates with Dell, and there are things in the BIOS, because when I boot up the system, it goes into the BIOS, and the BIOS asks me for a password to unencrypt. If I don't put in my password, I don't get any further in the BIOS. Then it boots up, and it's...
Is that a machine you bought or the
No,
company
it's one
provided?
that my company gave me.
Okay, what the companies will do, they'll go in and put an encryption lock on the BIOS so you can't change the BIOS.
No, this is that TPM stuff, the trusted platform. It stores the encryption key in it, and then you go into BIOS and unlock it, and then it can pass the key that's stored in the trusted platform module to Windows to do the decryption of the drive.
But I think that key is in the BIOS somewhere.
It's in the trusted platform module.
Okay, which
Yeah.
is a chip on there.
Right,
Okay.
exactly, yes, it's burned into the chip on the machine, which is one of the real risks, because if something happens to that laptop, the hard drive immediately becomes gone. There is no way to get it back, because the key, you never saw the key, nobody ever saw the key.
Yeah.
The key was stored on that
So
chip.
that might as well shred the drive. and
Exactly.
Reformat.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're concerned with,
Protection.
intellectual property,
Yeah.
or if we do have customer data on
You're-
the system, which could happen.
You're not supposed to store the only copy on your laptop.
Right,
Yeah,
Right, but if someone stole the laptop, they don't want either
Exactly,
of those to
yeah.
get in somebody's
right,
hands.
exactly. Mhm.
So from that respect, yeah. It serves a purpose.
yeah. And if you're really paranoid about these things, you don't keep stuff you care about on the device you use.
Mhm.
You keep it somewhere else. Somewhere that hopefully has more protection and more redundancy and such things.
Okay. Other questions?
I'm really done now.
Fantastic. Stan, thank you once again.
Gary, anything else before we
I don't think so. Thank you all for putting up with our occasional glitches this evening. A big thanks for Carolyn for coming and presenting tonight.
And we do hope that she wasn't backed into too many corners with some of the questions, but that just revisiting the beginner stuff really gets the brain cells working, and we appreciate that. I appreciate because there's so much stuff, I don't remember what I had to learn, what I forgot or didn't know at the beginning. And that's one of the reasons I want to run a beginner group.
And again, next Thursday at Nick and Elena's, I will be continuing my Docker series with SSL for containerized websites. Nick and Elena's, same bat time anyway, not the same channel.
Alrighty.
And the Blues are leading 2-0.
Woohoo!
All right.
Thanks, Vince. A lot of fun. Yeah, they were changing. Have they started the third period yet?